All right, everyone. I think we should get started this afternoon. One of the other sessions is still running a few minutes late, so I'm thinking we'll have people joining us as we chat, but we don't want to keep you too long, so we'll get rolling. My name is Madeleine. I am the Director of Content with seedworld Group, and we are very pleased to be presenting 3 panel discussions this week. The first one ran earlier this afternoon at noon, and it was an innovation-focused panel. This particular panel is focused on influence or advocacy, and our panel tomorrow morning at noon until 12:45, is on next generation insights on recruitment and retention, and really supporting the best of the next generation. So we hope you'll come back and join us for that as well. I am delighted to be hosting these 3 industry thought leaders. We're very excited that all 3 enthusiastically said that they would participate. We are talking about influencing for action. And I will say that when I sat down with Sarah to talk about this as a concept, she pointed out that influence often has a bit of a negative connotation as a word, and really advocacy often gets kind of lumped in the same way. And so we were really trying to come up with the wording of how we would frame what we're going to talk about. And it comes much more down to how do we tell our story? So the seed industry has an incredible story to tell. We are at the forefront of solving many of the world's biggest challenges. And yet, the seed industry as a whole hasn't always done an excellent job of telling its story. The story that, consumers, policymakers, job seekers, even we inside the industry sometimes hear is very shaped by outside forces. So if we are looking for the license to operate, if we're looking to be able to bring forward the innovations that the seed industry needs, and if we are looking to be able to draw the best people to be part of furthering this industry, what we really need to be doing is showcasing the good, both globally and locally, that we do in so many ways. So this discussion today is about whether you call it, how do you influence for action, how do you advocate for action, or how do you tell our story? That's what we're talking about today. So let me introduce our panelists. I'm just going to do a very brief introduction of each. Beside me here is Marc Cool from Corteva. Marc is the global seed policy lead at Corteva. He may win one of the awards for the most generations in the seed industry. I think you are a 5th generation seedsman, are you? Yep. And Marc brings 35 years of experience in various aspects of the seed industry. He has a master's degree in plant breeding and plant pathology from, tell me where?
University of Wageningen, which is University in Holland.
Perfect. And he leads the global seed policy development within Corteva Agriscience's public affairs department, particularly focusing on the global policy environment for genome editing. So, Marc, let me throw the first question to you before I even introduce the others. Tell me how your job description jives with what we're talking about today in terms of influence, advocacy, telling the seed industry story.
Thank you, Madeleine. So that's a lot of what I do every day actually is advocacy, influencing, telling the story, understanding the viewpoints of other people. Because what I do is I deal internally in the company with various departments, both the research department, who are identifying long-term research goals they have and types of products they're developing, and then the regulatory and government policy environment in which we work. The seed industry and ag and food production industry is very regulated. So understanding what those regulations are and trying to fit our products and our concepts not only today, but in the future within that environment is really important for us. And then if there's a change that needs to be made either internally with a product concept that may not have a good acceptance in the policy or societal perception in the future, we have to kind of adjust that a little bit with intelligence. And then likewise, if the policy or regulatory environment doesn't fit the concept that we feel has great value for agriculture and food production, we can make efforts to change that policy environment. So both those things are about advocacy and influencing. So a lot of what I do every day is really doing that. And we can talk a little more later about the way I see that. But it's paramount to really what a lot of us do or should be doing every day, telling the story. I like the way you put that.
Excellent. Let me turn next to Sarah. Sarah Wilbanks is sitting beside Marc. Sarah is the CEO at AOSCA, which of course is the Association of Official Seed Certifying Agencies. And Sarah has a Bachelor of Science in Ag Education from Clemson University, a Master's of Science in Ag Communications and Leadership from the University of Georgia, and a PhD in Animal Science from Clemson University. She is also published in several peer-reviewed journals. And I will say that none of those things are as impressive as she's one of the most helpful people in the industry. It's been a real pleasure working with Sarah. So Sarah, you're having an association role obviously means that your involvement with advocacy and influence and telling the seed industry story is different than private sector or public. How do you see your role in terms of influence and advocacy?
Yeah, well, I don't know that it differs as much really as anyone else's role, because I feel like we all have such a great piece of the puzzle to play within making sure that the public understands. Can you hear me?
Sorry.
The public understands how our whole food system works and the responsibility there and all of those things. So I feel like organization or not, even just as a individual, we all have kind of that same responsibility in trying to change the narrative from something that where people are getting misinformation offline or in other avenues related to agriculture, related to the seed sector, wherever it may be, and really kind of shifting that to something that's a positive and true, accurate statement. So.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Last but certainly not least, we are delighted to have Ian Miller, who is the Chief Development Officer for Pairwise. Pairwise is a really fascinating industry innovator that uses new breeding technologies, including CRISPR, to promote healthier eating habits via creating better food. So when Ian and I talked, he talked about kale that actually tastes good. I have to say, I like kale, so that one was not quite as exciting to me, but cherries without pits, that definitely sounded exciting. And your company's vision is to make produce more attractive to customers, to the consumer, via some real innovation. So obviously, because you're using some new breeding technologies and you're trying to be sort of leading edge, you would have a different perspective on the importance of influence and advocacy. Can you speak a bit to that?
Yeah, and maybe because I was thinking about the same sort of phraseology conversation that we were having. I think of it more of making that connection, and for us, it's making the connection with consumers. Our mission is really to make it easier for people to eat healthy fruits and vegetables. Everybody in this room knows we should eat more, and we don't. And our thesis is we don't do it because it doesn't fit into people's lifestyle as well as it could. It's not always convenient, doesn't always taste great, it's not always consistent. And a lot of the things that the CPG industry has done really well. But we think these new breeding technologies, including CRISPR, can really help accelerate innovation in that space and make those foods more convenient, tastier, healthier for consumers. So we've launched our first product. It's a mixed salad green under a brand that's called Conscious Greens. They're based on mustard greens. Mustard greens are very healthy, and they come in lots of shapes, colors, and sizes, but they taste very pungent. They taste like horseradish, frankly. If you had a whole bowl of them, more power to you. It'd be very difficult to do. So we took that flavor, that mustard flavor out. But what it's about is understanding where the consumer is at. Can we provide that consumer value? And we think if we can provide that consumer value, then they will actually be more open to the technology. So be transparent, tell people what we're doing, but also try to meet them where they are and solve a problem for them can be a very powerful connection to make. And that, food is a very emotional experience for people. And if we can make that connection for people, we can really ease adoption of this technology.
Excellent. Ian, I didn't fully introduce you, so let me just let our audience know that Ian served most recently as Chief Business Officer at Epic Sciences, and I did tell you that he's the Chief Development Officer at Pairwise. He holds a Juris Doctor degree with honors from Duke University of Law and a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry and Cellular Biology from the University of California in San Diego. And he is an avid Duke's fan and breeds a mean craft brew. So let's jump into some questions here. Obviously, the pandemic changed so many things in all of our lives. How is the new normal that we are now in? How has that kind of changed the nature of influence and advocacy? Can I maybe throw that one to you, Marc? Sure.
Well, actually, at the end of the day, I think those external factors don't have a lot of change in the human environment. We're all people. We all eat. We all care about our health of our families, health of the environment. All of us have the same basic needs and the shared value of wanting to prosper and be healthy and see food as a indeed emotional product, even more so, very cultural, historical, nourishment, well, beyond nourishment kind of product. So talking about that in its basis is the same thing. What has changed maybe in COVID is the mindset that society had, and that's maybe diminishing in the last 2 years or so. But the mindset that people had that food isn't always guaranteed. There can be supply chain disruptions. There can be issues with food security in areas of the world that did not have that before, such as in Europe or in North America. So that's maybe a little aha moment. What I'm very proud of is that we as an ag industry around the world, so as a farming food production community, we're still able to produce food during that time. So the story about how we do that, why we do that, what tools we use to do that still remains the same. And it's really important in my mind for us to continuously go back to that basic shared value story of, here's what we as an industry do, and here's the value it provides to society, regardless of external influences that are maybe trying to disrupt that. And that's the power of our story.
Well said. Sarah, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, just to add to that, I feel very strongly on what Marc suggested, but I think post-COVID, people really realized it's time to start paying attention a bit to how the systems work. And I think people are really hungry for information. And so that's really where we can step in and continue to be advocates for the things that we do in a lot of different platforms that maybe the ag industry is not always so good at utilizing. And so I feel like we've got a lot of potential to continue to share our messaging and our stories and all the things that we do on the positive aspect with our food production. But kind of one of the keys to that, I think, is just creating those true relationships with the individuals that we touch,
right? So
that they know that, farmers, the sustainability and the responsible practices that everyone is using in this industry to all achieve the common goal is really there. It's not what they may perceive or what they may see on their newsreel on social media and those aspects. So I think that's a really important factor.
Let me just touch back on what you said about certain avenues that maybe the ag industry hasn't pursued effectively enough.
Sure.
Are we talking social media? Are we talking specific
Yeah,
avenues?
I think all digital, marketing tools that are out there is something that we continue to need to get on board. It's in the ag industry, we're a bit shy to do so, or a lot of the folks that I associate are. You kind of cringe a little bit when people say things like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that we have to do. If we're not creating the narrative, we're spending our time negating the narrative that's not factual. And
Right.
so I think that's a really key part if we could just get ahead of that a little bit more readily than we probably do.
Absolutely. So for you, Ian, this concept of creating the narrative, when you're doing such innovative things as Pairwise is doing, how does that align with what you're trying?
Yeah, and I'll go back to. By the way, I agree with my co-panelists and Mark, your comments on sustainability, a supply chain that is robust. I think those things all certainly resonate. Again, I go back to this connection concept. To be transparent and authentic with consumers, and I think one of the lessons we've learned post COVID is maybe some things really haven't changed. There is a lot of power in having a tangible product that you can feed people and they can have a very personal experience with that product. So, for example, we took our salads to 3 different activation events in 3 different cities, served 6,000 salads, had posters up saying, hey, we made this with technology. We told people as we handed them salads what were happening, and there were QR codes they could scan. But then we asked them to taste it, and then we asked for surveys, and we got 3,000 surveys back from them. And what we got was a very high willingness to buy it, and less than 1% said anything about the technology. We asked specifically about it. So to me, that speaks to that power of that connection, because that's not a narrative that we're driving. That's something that we've made that connection with those consumers, and they've accepted it, right, for what it is, which is provides them benefit. So again, be authentic, lead with the benefits, still be transparent, but try to make that connection. And I think for us, then we've got videos of people are eating the salad and they're saying, hey, we love it, and all those sorts of things. That's more powerful than anything that we could draft or write. It's not to say that we shouldn't be doing those other things, writing papers, speaking to policy leaders. We do all those things as well. But having this connection at the consumer level really helps, I think, with the broader narrative of how these technologies can be really helpful.
It makes so much sense. Now, you were saying that what you're doing currently. What about looking forward to 2024? Is it a question of doing sort of more of the same? Do you feel a shift or an opportunity to pursue another avenue of influence and advocacy, or are you on the right track and you're going to continue on that track?
I think for us, it's going to be a lot more of the same. And by that, I mean, we've worked, we now have this sort of tangible physical product that we can work with. We do work with others in the industry as well. We think this is a good vehicle for us as we go and talk to policy leaders. We talk to NGOs, or we talk to others in the space about the benefits of this technology. We're going to be taking those salads out into retail in the Q1 of this coming year, and I think that gives us another vehicle to really have that conversation with people. So, looking forward, it's been quite a game-changing experience to be able to have something, again, tangible that an average person can pick up and eat.
Really try out. Yeah. And what is more real of an experience than actually eating it, right?
Eating it.
And it really shows a lot of trust if they're willing to.
Yep.
Sarah, let me turn to you and kind of throw a similar question at you. As we look into 2024, do you have new avenues that you are pursuing? Do you think that the realities of 2024 and beyond require a shift in thinking for influence and advocacy?
Yeah, I don't know so much a shift from what we're doing here in 2023 as a direct shift. But I do think that for us as an organization, AOSCA has been around for over 100 years. We're very established, but like I've shared with you before, we're really good at doing what we're doing, but we've not done a good job telling people about it. And you can look at that in some of our data points and other things. And so this is really a crucial time for us as an organization to utilize the concepts that are out there for us and be able to create strategic partnerships to really make sure we're sending the right messages and for the overall agricultural messages, and also kind of how our touch points reach the individual within seed production and the quality assurance and the traceability that we're able to provide with certified seed.
Perfect. Mark, can I pass the question on to you as well?
Yeah, no, thank you. And I very much, of course, agree with what Ian and Sarah are saying. I do sense a shift, and I sense a very positive, good shift, a necessary shift, rather than us as an industry and a food production system defending the technologies we use. So, the use of biotechnology, gene editing, mutagenesis, which some people question, chemistry for sure, water. I mean, we use a lot of inputs in agriculture. We use them optimally. We use them very precisely and very intentionally and very intelligently, but we do use technology. But rather than defend that, we need to shift towards, so what's the benefits? What is the product that you're developing that you can actually eat and that pleases you and that gives you as a human nourishment and pleasure and the other factors that you're looking for? And I think that shift is happening just now, from defending technology to talking about how technology enables the delivery of value and benefits to a humankind. And that to me is an exciting time.
Absolutely. Sarah, you talked about sometimes we all the time, the seed industry does fantastic things, but isn't always great at telling its story. I think if you were to, quiz everyone who is here at the Field Crop Seed Convention and say, is it important that the seed industry tell its story? You'd be hard pressed to find anyone who would say no. But there is a tendency to think, but it's maybe somebody else's job. It's maybe somebody else's role. Maybe someone else can do a better job than I can. Speak to that. Whose responsibility is it to take this on? And Mark, you touched a little bit on the how to do it. But is there a right way to do it? Is there a wrong way to do it from your perspective, Sarah?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting question. And I sat through the Corteva sponsored workshop yesterday, which was really wonderful. But it got me to thinking in the fact of whose responsibility really is this, right? So how do we go from kind of negating Karen at the grocery store to really creating the narrative that really needs to be out there on a larger scale? And to do that, we all have to find ways to put that information out there rather than, I think the quote that came up yesterday was 40 or 50% of Americans' population get all of their news off of their social media feed. And that's quite concerning. But it really goes to show you, if we don't meet people in those mechanisms and at those levels, we're really just not going to get as advanced with what some of the things Mark was saying. I mean, that's really exciting. But I think we all somehow in our business models need to put some pieces of that puzzle together to help the overall mission.
And just say that again, 40 to 50% was the stat that you read.
Right?
I think that was the number you
Yeah.
see it on.
Yeah. Mark, do you want to add to that? I know you already touched on the importance of a positive benefit-based message.
So a thought just came to mind. This is a meme I saw a couple of weeks ago, but it's appropriate in this context. So it used to be that when we went to high school, not in our case because we're biologists and breeders and scientists, but an average person in society went to high school and had science subjects in school and hated it, and openly hated it, and openly said physics, math, science, biology, I have no clue what all that means, and I don't want to know anything about that. Nowadays, people go on social media, they read something, and suddenly they're experts on science issues. So that division between actually being taught and knowing something versus reading it in some self-fulfilling media posts that support your thoughts already, there's a big chasm there, and how do we break that chasm?
Absolutely. No, I think I think we're all aware of exactly that space, but it sure is a hard one sometimes to bridge. Ian, in your role within your company, what is your feeling in terms of whose responsibility it is to more broadly speak this seed industry story? And you guys obviously are at a high level of innovation. Do you take more responsibility, less responsibility than other companies for that active messaging about the good news of the seed industry?
I think we all have an obligation to engage in these conversations. I don't see it as a difference between big or small company. I think it's not an either or. It's a yes and. I think we all have different stories to tell, and as Marc had said, that benefits-based conversation is really important. And I think it can be mutually reinforcing between different folks in the industry, right? Corteva is solving a lot of problems around, hey, how can we do more with less? How can we adapt to climate? How can we reduce the number of inputs? All those are critically important questions. Their global reach is different. Where, on our consumer products, it's really hitting on health, but it's the same basic idea, which is we need to make that connection to benefits with people. This is something that I think we all need to engage in to the extent that we can. Obviously we don't have the same resources necessarily as bigger companies are, but at the same time, because we're smaller, we might have access to different voices or narratives or things like that in that process. So I view it as a yes and. I think it's something that we all should be engaging in. And it's not just for the benefit of our companies in the industry. This technology is very important to help our food and agriculture system advance. It's not just CRISPR, but other advanced breeding technologies, chemistries, all these other things. So I think we all need to pick it up and carry it.
So can we talk concrete strategies? Can we talk, what does this look like inside of a company like Corteva, a company like Pairwise, or within an association? And Ian, I'll just get you to pull your mic a little closer towards you. So there we go. Let me throw it back to you, Ian. In terms of concrete strategies, what does that mean when you're sitting around the boardroom table, when you're sitting with your staff? What are the kind of conversations you're having about getting the message out?
So one of them, again, is leading with the products and the benefits, and having that sort of concrete experience for people is a very important part of that strategy. It actually goes back a little bit to the founding of the company. One of our theories were, unfortunately, biotech ended up with a little bit of a bad name because we felt like it didn't make as direct benefit to the consumer. And so that stakeholder in the certainly benefit to other parts of the chain. But that indirect benefit wasn't enough for the consumer to really accept it. So that we feel like having those products, those tangible things, are an important part of the puzzle to help to drive it forward. We also are very active on the policy side of things, and we do cooperate with other folks in the industry, including Corteva or Bayer, other folks in the space, to carry that story and other stories to them as well. So, for example, whether it's talking to Health Canada, where we got a clearance from them to sell our greens as not novel, having that health focused story is really helpful, right? When you go and do that, or frankly, you're visiting sometimes politicians. We've been in the White House or UK in Parliament. Hey, try these. Like, these are things. It's a tangible thing for them to connect with. So really helping to utilize that bridge to have this broader conversation around benefits is the tangible strategy.
Marc, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so very similar. Then one thing kind of connecting this point with the science point from before is, as scientists, we tend to believe in a truth. So there's fact points that prove the truth. But in a discussion with society and politicians, there is no end truth, because truth is according to every person's own belief. And So number one, finding that common shared value I spoke about before as a basis for then being able to find a bridge between different opinions is one important strategic element. The other, which in our company frankly was and still is difficult to push through, is that we need to understand that the conversation we're having with greater society is a never-ending dialogue. Mm-hmm. We're never going to reach a conclusion. We're never going to reach a conclusion that society gives us a certificate that we can put on the wall that says, okay, you have freedom to operate. We trust your technology. It's good. That discussion is ever evolving, ever ongoing. So the strategy we have is to open ourselves up to have that discussion, knowing that the discussion doesn't result in a really nice black and white yes or no. And the way we do that is we're transparent, as Pairwise is as well. We have the same principles of transparency. We believe that a lot of people in the biotech era in the late 80s and 90s began mistrusting biotech because they didn't know what it was. And we forgot as an industry to explain the benefits of that technology. So now what we're saying is we will be transparent about what we're doing, knowing that not everyone will agree, but that's okay because we're having a conversation. The conversation then highlights and clarifies what everyone believes in, and then we can work towards those common beliefs.
Perfect. Sarah, how about you?
You guys have summed it up really well. We're probably a little bit maybe behind in where we are as an organization. And so one of the things that we're doing and have really focused on this year and we'll go into 24 doing is just the educational piece among ourselves and really trying to identify what our messaging is. How do we connect to the consumer and the growers that grow certified seed and all of those pieces of the puzzle. So what they're saying is, a little bit different aspect, but, we went for a really long time without telling our story. And so we're in the beginning phases of really kind of refining what that messaging is for certified seed and how that applies to the consumer itself.
Excellent. Now, I promised Marc that we would let him go to his next meeting on time. So we still have a few minutes. I've got one last question that I'm going to ask. But before I do that, I'm wondering if I can throw the door open to questions. Fawad, you've got a question. Maybe can you come a little closer? It's pretty loud in the background.
So, great panel. Marc, we have met many times before, so wonderful. We have a vast experience. So I have a comment and a question. The comment is, I think all of the things that we're talking about is staying within the seed space. It's not going, seed is going to be a grain, and grain is going to be food, and food is going to be a grocery store, and that's what we are buying and consuming. We need to be in their spaces. We need to take the story to them rather than we're just making amplified noise around here and hope that everybody will hear and listen. Okay, so we need to take our story to them because in today's age, what is happening is we are living in a society that is driven by consumer demand. If we make that connection with the consumer, that the food that you're eating, there is traceability and transparency behind that, and comes from certification. Okay, you should know about. So I think there is that misconnection that we are making a lot of effort here. There is a lot of research. There's a lot of articles are being published within the seed space. We need to go outside of the seed space and pick our consumers. So that's a comment.
A good comment. Okay.
Yes, and the question is, there's a lot of talk about, obviously, every breeder, number one priority is the yield. Yield is the winner every time. Now, there is more, another focus is the nutritional side, which is great. Okay, is there any effort on, is there any effort on Corteva side, or for bigger companies, that nutritional side and perhaps the seed or crop production has medicinal value that will cure people for some of the diseases that we are all having. And there's a huge amount of people investing tons of money in pharmaceuticals and all that. Could that be at least a deterrent and a proactive way to make sure that it's not that the choices, but the foods that we eat become more medicinal and more valuable?
Yeah. So thank you for the question, Lee. Nice to see you as well. And actually, Ian and Pairwise are living exactly up to the first comment and the question. So that is the easy answer. But you're correct that we do need to communicate our story of agriculture as a cohesive unit further down the value chain, all the way to consumers. And we also need to understand the consumer needs. And when you define yield, there's many ways of defining that. It can be productivity per acre in bushels per acre by a farmer, but it can also be, a harvestable, no food lost food that goes to the grocery store, or it could be calories per acre, or food pounds per acre, or oil content or oil quality per acre. There's various ways of defining yield, but in the end, yield, in whatever definition you have, is clearly the way to produce a business sustainable production system that then is able to provide a sustainable product to society. So the answer is not quite sure about so there's a way to increase the medicinal value of food, and that is eat vegetables. But in the case of what we're doing, yes, there have been efforts made to increase certain nutritional aspects of even row crops, and those efforts for sure will be continued as long as they're rewarded in a payment back to the farmer. And the farmer's value then will change based on the economic marketable value of that product, and that will then drive the breeding sector.
Ian, given that, as Marc said, this is some of exactly what you're looking at in your company, do you want to respond a little bit?
I obviously in violent agreement that we need to take this story further out. I think we've seen a lot of progress in that over the last few years. I mean, I think in popular media and things like that is becoming more common to see articles on what the technology is doing, and providing those stories I think are important. So I do think that that's happening. And it's not just us, there are others in the space and having these kinds of conversations. I echo a little bit of what Marc said on the yield. I mean, yield is, it's more with less, right? Can we make a given acre of land more productive? And I think there's other technologies that provide, this same technology can help with, climate resilience in various aspects. I think there's a lot of benefits to society that I think can have traction outside of the space that is here. I would welcome, the opportunities for the industry to tell those stories more often. There's climate change, and then there's adapting to it. And I think these types of things these types of technologies are going to be critical for that. I think other story we talked about was supply chain resilience. Oh man, when the war in Ukraine hits really hard, right? How resiliency needs to impact there. So I agree with you. I think there are more stories we can tell. I think there are other benefits we can talk to. I don't think we necessarily have to go to a pharmaceutical and a row crop type of model to do that, but I understand what you're saying. But I do think there's an opportunity to tell these other stories of benefits and get that out there more.
Excellent.
But yeah, eat more vegetables, quite healthy.
I'm gonna jump ahead to my final question for you, just so we can get you out the door on time. And my final question is, if you could come up with a challenge for our audience. So we've talked sort of at the corporate level. If you could speak to each of the individuals here in the room, what would a challenge be that they could take home to their workplace, regardless of where they are in the seed value chain, in order to be part of, and maybe they already are doing an excellent job, so to take it to the next level of telling the seed industry story. Sarah, can I start with you?
Sure. I guess my challenge would just be to try to, take 1% of your time or your staff's time in 2024 and try to really push out the messaging that you're wanting to put out there to tell your story. And I think if we do that, we're all very, very busy. But if you put that in your strategic initiatives for the year and you really make that a priority, if we all did that, what kind of messaging and what kind of impacts could we make. So
Thank you for that. Ian, do you want to go next?
I guess maybe just to echo what we've been talking about thus far, which is, when you have the opportunity to talk about it, talk about the benefits. I think that's, and we're all in this, boat together. I think what we can provide to society, I think most people are not aware of how critically important the innovations that this industry is producing is to solving problems they really care about. So I think if we make that connection to folks, I don't generally like the word education because it sometimes makes it sound like I'm a teacher and I'm telling you what to do. But I think making that connection with people with what they value, finding those commonalities, I think that would be the one thing to come out with.
Excellent. Mark, it's always hard to go last because Sarah and Ian both touched on really important ones. Do you have
Well, I agree
something
with
else?
everything they said.
Perfect. Excellent.
I do very much, and I would add maybe two small comments. One is that, we speak to a lot of people within the industry, but we also every day speak with people outside the industry, in our families, in our community, on the street, in the store, in professional associations or volunteer organizations that we're part of. And don't be afraid to talk about the ag industry because it does connect with needs of humankind, even if they don't recognize or know that. The other thing I would say is that in terms of trying to influence people, don't take every opportunity you have to discuss something with someone as a negotiation. Don't take it as something that you have to win. Give space for the opinion of both parties. Give space so you can identify where you're both coming from. Listen to the concerns of the other person. Try to identify, some elements of your story of who you are and what you think with the elements of that other person's story, and use that as an opportunity to softly, insert your opinions without the need to convince them of something. And also remember that the conversation you're having with someone probably isn't the only conversation you'll have. You'll speak to that same person, be it an influencer in our industry or simply someone in your family or community. You'll talk about this topic probably more often. By the way, the more open you are to listening and accepting other ideas, probably the more often you'll talk about it. So think of it as this is a long-term discussion. We're never going to reach a conclusion, but the discussion itself is hopefully going to highlight the fact that what we do is really good for the earth. Thank you.
Mark, Sarah, Ian, thank you for making time for us. We really appreciate it. You provided excellent insight. Can we just give them a thank you?